Now I'm going to talk about love and politics, since we're in, the world really the U.S. being such a dominant player in the world, and we're in a transition period. And there are a lot of people who, politics is politics is the nice corner of war, basically, the nice face of war. And so you, even the public school system, it's got an element. So what is war? War is, again, it's about who do we like and who do we hate, and that we somehow think that if we can kill the thing we hate, then our life will get better. And I don't think that's really true, but it's very difficult to believe that much can be achieved through peace and love. It just like those are the bead-wearing Birkenstock people. Like, just leave them alone. It doesn't sound pragmatic. It doesn't sound like a good way to make money or anything. But what this video is about, a pragmatic example. So I co-founded an environmental group in 1990. In 2000, I left the organization, mainly because the organization didn't agree with the direction I wanted to go. And I thought, okay, you guys can have your little thing that fails all the time. Because I saw how to win, and people really didn't want to do it. Because what it takes to win is actually really listen and understand your enemies, and not go from the position of hate or that you're even better than them. So I believed that, but nobody believed me that we should even, they freaked out, actually. I was just talking to people in the US Congress that people thought were bad people. And look, I was a part of it. There were no real CRMs, contact relation management systems. And about 1992, I just sat down at the computer. There's this thing called Microsoft Access, and I programmed a database that we put any feature in we want. And one of the features we had was it was called Bad Guy, I think, or good. We had a button for good. I think it was called Bad Guy, and it was a checkbox. Because the idea was we shouldn't talk to the bad guys, because they're the ones that are out to get us, and they want to cut down all the forests, and we don't want them to know what we're doing, because our goal, we were wearing a suit and tie, but we thought of ourselves as like guerrilla warriors in suit and tie. We were going to organize our side to gang up and crush the opposition. And we got some things like some floor votes and Senate sponsors, but it wasn't really working. If you want to be honest, you want to pass a law, if it's going somewhere or not, and we were not succeeding. And I started taking some courses in peace-based leadership, and suddenly it's like, wow, we're so on the wrong track. But my friends literally thought I was taking drugs, because I had dropped my animosity to the bad members of Congress. And I just wasn't really able to reconcile that. And I just thought, well, I'm just going to, I also try to impose my views or unilaterally take action without being able to convince the other people. That's a pitfall of some of the things I teach, is that when your eyes are open to the power of what I'm teaching, you have to be very loving to the people who are not ready to get on board. You can't use that knowledge as an excuse to try to dominate or railroad the other people. And I didn't even realize I was doing it. I'm trying to let myself off the hook. It was like I was a butterfly that hadn't flapped my wings. I didn't know what I was doing. I was just trying all kinds of new leadership things. So anyway, I left the organization, and I was like the lead editor of our magazine, and we would write magazines about who to hate, basically. We didn't use those words, but a lot of the environmental movement is about that. In fact, even now I'm seeing, even again, I saw it when George W. Bush won the election in 2000. Now Trump just won, and already the major environmentalists are saying, oh, our worst nightmare. And I agree, sort of, but the only thing is that I couldn't, the solution is very simple, but as long as you're holding people as the enemy, you're never going to get to what I see. If you want to solve big environmental problems, talk to me, because the solutions are right at hand. And that even offers a solution for the so-called bad people. So instead of actually really understanding how to get gains in the Trump administration, all these groups are doing is mounting, because it's good fundraising. It's like, go out to all the people on your side and say, we hate this guy, give us money so we can hate him more and defend against his actions. And yeah, I agree, there's some actions I think are worth defending against that Trump has said he's going to do. So, he's not I don't think he's a great environmentalist, but it would be a lot easier to make him into a great environmentalist and try to defend. And the thing is, the defensive posture has kept us in this kind of environmental stasis, when I'm seeing that environmental economic opportunities are some of the biggest. It could be the biggest sector in the whole United States. But when you get stuck in the political us versus them context, the money doesn't flow. And the policies in the US are largely made by the people who have the most money. So, and in the world, let's be honest, the more money you have, that's power. Powerful people they get their way more often than everyone else. So if ecosystem restoration is a gazillion-dollar sector, why don't we handle that in a business-like way and demonstrate to people, like, this is the economic course to follow. There's so many examples. Anyway, I'm gratified. A guy like Robert F. Kennedy Jr., one of the greatest environmentalists, he's created billions of dollars of environmental economy while saving and restoring ecosystems. It's like, I've never seen somebody like that at the top of any government, much less the US. And I'm sure he's going to be somewhere in the cabinet. As I'm saying this, he's up for Health and Human Services. But even what he's talking about there in terms of getting the toxins out of our food, well, those toxins are killing more than people. They're killing billions of critters. Glyphosate, these things are destroying ecosystems. So even if he just succeeds in that and he doesn't, because Trump has said, stay away from the environment, just do your health thing. But if he succeeds in getting all the poisons out of our food, that's going to be great for wildlife. It's going to have a huge impact on the globe. And people around the world are fighting the Americanification of their food supply, because the US corporations, that's what they want to do. They want to spread their disease globally. And I see it. I've seen it and I see it. Okay, what a nice rant for a loving guy like me. So what I'm saying is there's so many opportunities. But anyway, so we're talking about the year 2000, and I left the organization, and I decided that I would go see if I could become friends with the people who I'd professionally vilified. And so there was this guy, I don't know, I'm trying to think, should I say his name? Is that right? I'll just say, I won't use his name. You can look it up, or you can, if you really want to know, contact me personally. Like, if we're working together, I'll tell you that the name doesn't really matter. It's really the role. So his role was he was the Senate aide for the guy who was the chairman of the Forests Committee in the Senate, who, in our opinion, had done more to destroy U.S. forest ecosystems than anybody. So, and I remember when I'd walk in the halls of Congress, if I would, in the office buildings, like the Senate office building, I remember there's a big atrium in one of them, and I saw him coming, and I just gave him a huge berth, because when I was that word, in other words, I gave him a lot of distance, because across the railing was about a 3-story drop into this courtyard with a big Alexander Calder sculpture. And I thought, I had so much hate for him. I thought if I got too close, something bad could happen, either to me or to him. And I don't want to be a part of that. That's what hate does. You don't communicate. You don't talk to your enemies. You have no idea what they're talking about or what motivates them or anything. How can you make a deal with somebody if you can't even listen to them? Anyway, that era had passed and I was on my own, and I gave him a call, and he picked up the phone, and I said, hey, I want to apologize for something. And this is a kind of it's a trick, but it's not really a trick. I actually meant it. He said, really? What? I said, well, I've been co-director of this environmental group for 10 years, and I think I know what you're about, but I've never even talked to you. And you have a pretty big role in the health of the ecosystems in the United States, the most important biologically diverse lands in the whole United States. And I've never even taken the time just to sit down with you personally, man to man, and just chat and learn what you're about. And I said, would you be willing to come in and talk? And he said, sure, yeah. And so we scheduled an appointment. Like, he didn't have any hatred for me. I was the guy. He had, he was a powerful guy. What does he care, in a way? But still, it wasn't just that. It wasn't just, but in my mind, and because that environmental training, the bad guy, everybody thought that all these people are always talking, lying, every word coming out of their mouth is intended to deceive. And certainly there's quite a lot of that going on, but I decided to kind of drop that, like to not come in there with a predetermined point of view about what's going on in his head. So we had the meeting. In the meeting, I said to him, when I was 5, they cut down all these trees in my school to widen the road, and I've carried a grudge of that my whole life. I've always hated that, and then they tried to cut down another tree, and I failed at saving that, and I hated that mayor. And I said, I'm really sorry. I've been bringing that kind of hatred to in how I feel about you, and I'm just here to say I'm not going to bring that in this conversation. I just want to hear what you say about what's your belief about the value of ecosystems on our public lands. Now, he's an aide, so he's being kind of diplomatic. He said, well, the senator who he worked for, the senator's point of view is that the ecosystems are the most important value of the public lands. And in my head, so like my neuroplasticity was going, this guy's lying, what a fraud. It's like just running. But I just said, you know what, shut up. We're just going to listen to him. And so I just dropped that whole you're lying point of view and just listen to him. And what he told me, so I said, what's it going to take to actually have that expressed? And he gave me kind of a list of issues, and it was very profound, actually. And the thing is, I was friends with some of the CEOs of the major environmental groups, and I was sort of shocked that they both had the same kind of checklist of why it was so difficult to make ecology the primary value on this 200 million acre or 80 million hectare US national forest system. I found that very shocking. And so what I realized in that meeting and what I'd been thinking is that, before the meeting, and then I had this little project, I thought, the reason that people think this way, that people don't value ecosystems, is they don't even understand them. So rather than fighting for legislation, I had this idea of doing what I call the ecosystem caucus. I had this idea, I said, how about, you're on the conservative side, there's the liberal side, we've all got our scientists, the ones that will say whatever we want. And how about we have some big kind of convocation of all the senators and all the scientists from across the political spectrum, you could say, about ecosystems. And let's just get together and talk about ecosystems and see if we can come up with some agreement on the value and what's essential. He said, I like that idea. He said, not only do I like that idea, but I'd be willing to help you get grants. Like, I know a whole bunch of funders who would fund this project. These are funders I'd never heard of before because I had been so involved in what the more eco-y foundations and the ones who would never believe what I just did, actually. So I said, that's great. And I took my win in a way, and then, but the problem is, and this is again why I teach what I teach, I didn't have my own income to support myself during that process. So even though I was doing these experiments, I was no longer getting a salary from the organization I built. I didn't have any real means of support, and I had a family. So I called people who had funded me in the organization and were willing to write some grants for me. And I said, look at this, this is an amazing opportunity. If we get the whole Senate, and there was no internet of any meaning even back then, this would have just been global news. You know, it would have been worth $100 million at least of earned media covering the story and using that story to really help educate the whole country, even the whole world, like, what is an ecosystem? Not everybody talks about this. If you're in this video, probably you care about it, but there's a lot of people who don't even have any knowledge of the word or care or what it means to their lives, how important it is for them, all that. I realized the problem with protecting ecosystems is that value has not been inculcated broadly enough in Western culture and other cultures, and everyone's stuck in survival mode. And it's like, well, if I don't kill this part of the ecosystem, I'm not going to eat, you know? And meanwhile, we're losing these values. This guy, you know, Dr. Costanza by then had already valued global ecosystem services at, I guess, I don't know, $20 trillion a year, just throwing out this free money. You know, every time we destroy an ecosystem, we're just making our lives so much harder. It's so economically valuable. Dr. Robert Costanza, he was one of my advisors as well. He's one of the environmental heroes in trying to help people create the ecological economy. Anyway, my buddies at the foundation, and I was pretty much on the ropes. They said, well, we don't want to fund that. We'll fund something else, and like a book project. And so I took the money out of weakness. I never got the book done because I was already worrying about what's going to happen when I run out of the money for the book. You know, I had not created a stable platform for myself as a leader that if you work with me, you will have a stable financial platform for the rest of your life. But I didn't take care of that. So anyway, that was an amazing outcome. And then he became George Bush won the election, George W. Bush, and this guy got elevated to chief of the USDA Forest Service. So he was the highest political appointee, the highest, he was the head of the whole organization that I had worked for 10 years to try to transform. And he invited me to his office, and we talked again. And again, he invited me. He offered to introduce me to his his institutional funders for grant projects. And I just, look, it's my bad. I don't know, do I feel ashamed of this? It's just a lost opportunity. This is why I teach, because how many opportunities do you get to make a mistake like I made then, not being ready just to receive everything I asked for from my opponent? I don't think I had really even myself imagined how successful that idea of giving up my hatred, approaching my opponent, political opponent. I mean, he didn't have any guns. I mean, there's no violence involved because, again, he's on the soft end of politics. We're not talking about meeting some guy on a field with a duel with a pistol. And the fact is, he was willing to help. The guy the guy who I had carried around as the most evil person in the whole arena of what I was doing, turned out to be the guy that not only had the key to solving the problem I wanted to solve, but was willing to use it and with me and empower me and not ask me to sell out my values or to do anything like that. I was shocked. So this is a shocking story. It's profound and it changed my life. And I have a few more, but this is already 20 minutes long. So that's going to be the end of this video. The opportunities in politics that are available when you drop your hatred and start actually talking and listening with a blank slate without giving up your goal. It's not about you becoming like them, or you're not even going to be like them, because the them you think they are is all a projection of your own mind. So when you can drop your mind, when you can just enter a conversation with pure listening, and pure listening is also pure love, there's a lot to be gained. And we're in this new dynamic era. And if you kind of like the idea of working in political bodies to create gains, I urge you to work with me. You know, let me coach you, because it's a lot more fun. You'll have more money for yourself and the project you want, and the chance of succeeding will be much better. You know, if only I could go back to 1990 and start with what I know now, the world would be so different, because we had big goals and it's so clear we would have achieved them if we had not used the us versus them mentality. And, you know, it can be harder to see that when you're like really impoverished, you're in a difficult situation. But most of us who care about, you know, the greater good, we're doing it as a choice. We're not, you know, maybe we went to college. We have the ability to even conceive of having these kind of conversations with the people in power. So if you want to create something in the world that involves politicians, you know, book a meeting in the notes below and let's get started.